Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome back to the Pattern Design Circle podcast. I am so excited to be here in your ear again, and I have a special guest and friend with me, Hanna Lisa of Making Stories. We had her here on the podcast a little over a year and a half ago, I think, and we just keep bringing you back to talk about vulnerable things around business. So super excited to have you here. Last time we were talking about paying yourself as a designer and what you were going through in your own business at that point. You weren't a designer at that point, but as a publisher and paying yourself. So we talked through kind of we did talk through what you did to change that so that you actually were paying yourself and you could making stories more sustainable. And now you have been vulnerable again this last couple months and talking about money again in your business. So can you catch us up? What's been happening? What were kind of the long-term results, and what did you see from the changes you made to pay yourself last time we chatted? And then how has it gotten to where you are now?
Absolutely. First, I'm so excited to be back. I mean, I love you. I love your community, and I am so happy and very, very thrilled to get to talk about vulnerability as a business owner again. I wish we didn't have to. I wish I hadn't been in the situation that kind of, happened. We're going to talk about this at the beginning of the year. That brought this topic back into my life and into our conversations, and that's why I'm here today. But it is what it is. And I think one of the things that really matters to me is being open about these things, because I am not the only one that this is happening to. And I think especially in the last year, I have seen a lot of businesses, be they big or small, close in the fiber world. And some of them really, at least to me, like very, very suddenly. And I think when I look at things like that from the outside perspective, obviously without knowing what has been going down behind the scenes with those businesses, I kind of think that they must have been struggling with possibly similar topics for quite some time. And I always find it very helpful, almost healing in a way, to talk about this and then also to hear from others who are going through the same thing. So coming back to your question of catching everyone up on what's been happening. So as you already said, I run Making Stories. We're an online yarn shop focusing on sustainably produced knitting yarns and notions with a publishing side to it. That was actually what we started with in 2017, and we added the yarns in 2021. And now we are at a point where the yarn side of the business is actually the much bigger part of it. Magazine publishing has been really difficult, which has also kind of contributed to this situation. But again, we're going to get into that later. So last time that we chatted, that was, I think, in the fall of 2022. And that was shortly after I had gone public with the fact that I hadn't been able to pay myself for working on Making Stories after coming back from maternity leave at the end of 2019. And that I was in a position where that wasn't longer feasible. And B, I also didn't want to do that anymore, because the by not paying myself, I was perpetuating this idea in the fiber world or in the fiber industry that you don't actually have to pay yourself. And while that technically is true for a lot of people, and like including myself for a long time, because I was in this very privileged situation that I have a partner who was making money that, was enough for the both of us. It's problematic to not be paying myself despite being in that comfortable situation, because it allows you as a business owner to not charge what you actually need to charge to be making a living. And that then sort of cascades down into the entire industry. And in October 2022, I was like, I need to actually start paying myself. And I also want to start paying myself. One of the big things that I did was start a Patreon-like membership thing that's called the Making Stories Collective. That still runs strong to this day. Shout out to all the collective members. That was one way for me to generate sort of additional monthly income. Spoiler alert, that was not what actually solved the financial problems. It's a small but mighty group of people that we have there. But in terms of revenue, like we make like maybe 400 to 500 euros a month with the collective, which is only a portion of our, like a very small portion of our revenue. I think when I looked at the data from 2023, the collective revenue was like maybe like 3 or 4%, 5% maybe. So not a lot. I did start paying myself a regular monthly salary starting in December 2022, so shortly after we spoke the last time. And I have been paying myself consistently since then, which is something that I'm very, very happy and proud of. And I honestly actually think that the biggest shift to the business was the mental shift of every month I am transferring a set amount of money into my bank account. It's not a ton. I'm like very happy to be transparent about this. It's 2,500 euros gross, which is a salary of 30,000 euros a year. That's like roughly, if you convert it, like 30,000 US dollars. I think we're at like almost 101. So if I were to hire someone for the position that I have, CEO of a company, like no one would actually do this. But it was such a big shift for me.
Yes.
Like I did not anticipate how much this would change just this little, but just this thing.
One quick little tip that I have heard around that with the mindset thing is from day one of your business, which I have not done. I mean, I still am not paying myself, to be transparent. I've heard go ahead and transfer a set amount every single week. So even if it's just $1 a week, that mindset of knowing I'm paying myself and that this money is going to me, and then increase it to $5 a week and $10, whatever it is that's actually reasonable for your business where you are. But I've heard that that's super powerful for actually implementing that mindset shift.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think for me, one of the really hard things was actually coming up with this number. Because I was going from zero, but actually not starting from scratch, right? I had a business. And if I had done this the way that I would have probably approached it like a couple of years ago, I would have been like looking at the business, being like, okay, what can I afford? Like that kind of thing. I don't think the mindset shift would have been that big. Because now this is the first and most important expense in my mind to the business every single month, because without me, making stories wouldn't exist, right? This is more important than buying new yarn. This is more important even than like paying the rent in our studio. This is because like this, a lot of making stories is this. And if I can't do this work because I'm not paying myself, then the business goes, right? That like for that to sink in, it took the better part of the last year. But I think that was just a really big realization. And I think that that is something with, you know, like, because I don't want to say there was resentment, because there wasn't resentment towards the business, but I have experienced that in previous businesses where I wasn't able to pay myself. You know, I kind of started resenting the work because I wasn't paying myself. And I think that is something that you can alleviate by paying yourself even small amounts. The way that I came up with a number was I still have some student loans to pay back in a contract situation that's not entirely a loan situation. But essentially, I came up with the yearly number because that would sort of get me out of this student loan situation within the next 4 years, right? And then I was like, all right, I just have to make this work. And the other facet of this was that as a household, we looked at our budget and at our expenses, and we were like, all right, with this gross amount, I can put like 2K into our household budget. David, my partner, can put a bit more in, and then we're fine. Just as sort of a tip or like insight into how we did it. If someone who's watching or listening is like, okay, how did you actually come up with this number? So there were some external circumstances, and that kind of made me also really happy, because I know exactly where this money is going towards, right? So yeah, so I started doing that, and I have been working with a profit first method. I don't know if we actually talked about this in the last podcast episode that I was on.
I don't remember, but it was a year and a half ago, so we definitely probably have listeners that haven't listened to that episode.
Yeah. So just a really quick, not ad, because I'm not sponsored, but I really personally like the profit first method. There is books around it, and I know there's coaches around it, but essentially it's nothing more than you setting up multiple accounts, bank accounts for your business, and each one is associated with a specific thing. So for our business, we have our general bank account, and then there's a bank account that's called Hanna Lisa's salary. And then there's a bank account that's called like buying yarn. And then there's a bank account that's called publishing side. And then there's a bank account that's called taxes. And at the end of every month, you are distributing the revenue that you're making between those different bank accounts, right? And because the very most important expense is my salary, that is the one that gets transferred first, and then the rest is being split between the other accounts, so that I don't run into the situation that I am like, oh no, there's not enough money to pay myself because I just spent all of the money that we made on buying yarn. And that was also really important, because just with this sort of action of transferring this money to this other bank account every month, I am telling myself I am worth something, right? Like, not that I would have to need that money to, that's a different type of conversation, right? About self-worth and capitalism. But it is telling me how important I am to the business. Now that way we went through through the majority of, or like through the first half of the last year up until July. Everything was great. The revenue numbers were looking up. We were making, a profit despite me paying myself, because that's an additional 2.5K every month that we didn't have that year before, right? And I was like, at the end of July, I'm like, we're crushing it. Everything's great. And then August came, and I was like, ooh, this month isn't that good. And then September came, and September wasn't that good. And that way, we basically sort of hit a little below our revenue target every month during the fall last year. And if you hit a little bit below the target, so the target, I set the target based on my cash flow projection. So, I know how much money I need every month to pay me, to pay my team, to pay the yarn that we're going to buy, all of those things. And then like a bit of a buffer. Now, if you have a really bad month, you're probably like, ooh, okay, this isn't great. If you're like a little bit, like you're missing it by 5%, you're missing it by 10%. I was like, this is fine. It's fine. If you do that month after month after month in the busiest season of the year, that's not good. That's not good. So by November, I was like, okay, I am really worried. And December was the worst month revenue-wise that we've ever had in our business. And that despite us actually working more in December than we did any December before. And at the end of December, I was like, this is really not good. This is really, really, really not good. Especially because we run on the publishing side of the business. We run on a biannual cycle. So we publish 2 magazine issues a year, and they come out in March and September. But because we have stockists that we need to ship to all over the world, we usually get the magazines 2 months ahead, like before that. So in January. And once the magazines are delivered, I have to pay the printer. And when I looked at the printer invoice of 9,000 euros in January and our bank account, I was like, I do not have this money in the bank account. I cannot pay this invoice. Even if I wanted to, I can't. And that was really, really, really scary and really hard, because I was sitting there and I was just like, this cannot be happening again. Like, I just felt so defeated. And so I was like, I am such a bad business owner. How can this be happening again a year and a half later? How is this even possible? I talked to my partner about it over dinner, and he was like, well, when is the red line? How long are you going to keep going? And it wasn't great. Like, it really wasn't. I was just like, how is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
And then I slept over it. And then I am a data person. And I was like, all right, I need to answer this question for myself. Like, what is the line in the sand, and why is this happening, and how is this happening? So I went back and looked at the 2023 numbers, and I realized that we had made a loss in the entire year of like 8.5K or so. But that also meant that we had made way more than the year before, because I had paid myself 30,000 euros plus the expenses for my business coach that I had paid out of my own savings last year, right? Like, so in comparison to that, it actually wasn't looking that bad. If I had paid myself 8K less, we wouldn't be in this situation right now, right? So that gave me a lot of comfort, because in my mind, so if this was like the step that I was at last time that we spoke, right? In my mind first, I was like, all right, I dropped back down here. Like, how is this happening? And then I realized, no, I'm actually here. Like, yes, the situation is still not good, and I still need to figure out a way to fix it, but I haven't dropped back down to here, right? Like, we are in a similar, but not the same situation again. And that just helped a lot. just mentally, it helped me so much to shift from like, I am such a bad business owner to like, no, I am not. And I can figure out a way to fix this.
Yes, 100%. It reminds me of the visual of the spiral of, you're
Mm-hmm.
going up the spiral and you there are like cycles to just life and business things that we
Yeah.
just experience over and over again. And it can feel like we're just back at the same starting point. But in reality, you're climbing up the spiral
Yeah.
staircase. Yeah, and then also just thinking of success in general, I know for myself, I've just reached my 5-year design anniversary, which means I started my business 6 months before that as actually selling the products, like hand knit hats and mittens and all those things. Um, and last year was, well, just thinking about hitting 5 years it felt really rough because of all these. I am a high performer, overachiever, that kind of personality. And then to be like, this isn't, like what I would have envisioned for 5-year success
Mm.
monetarily. But just reframing it, like every time I kind of start to go in that spiral, I always try to reframe it for myself of how much different I am as a person, and it's all because of being a business owner. Like, there's a lot that has happened in the last 5 years in my life, and that, you know, the things that I've achieved, well, yes, I have been making more money, and then I end up spending more money. I have cut back on expenses because of this, specifically guests inside of Pattern Design Circle. I was paying 2 guests every month, and I realized that's just not a sustainable way to continue my business right now. Um, so the the money coming in keeps increasing, but I just kept increasing my
Mm-hmm.
expenses to match it.
Yeah.
Um, so, part of it's like being honest of like, all right, this is my fault. Part of this is my fault. These are decisions that I made, and I don't regret those decisions, but that also explains the numbers. But then also looking at other definitions of success as well and being like, hey, actually, I have achieved a lot. Even just the projects that I've done in 5 years in my business, I've kind of done a lot of stuff. And
Mm.
so that reframe of really actually looking at the big picture and not getting sucked into the negativity of what the situation is.
Totally. And yeah, I think there is so much value in looking at both sides and looking at the hard question of what could I have done differently? What are the things that I did that contributed to that? Like to me, it was just like a same thing as you know, like if there's money coming in, you can spend it. I'm not being as disciplined with that profit first approach, like the way that I was at the beginning of the year. And also just holding on to certain things beyond, like after actually knowing that they weren't good for the business.
Mhm.
Like one example is that we did, one of my ideas when we first started out offering the yarns was that it would be great to have kits for the patterns in our magazines so that people could buy the kits and have everything that they need. Our customers are not kit customers, and I didn't want to see that for the longest time. And that meant that I had, I think, like 4 magazine issues where I was buying a lot of yarn, putting a lot of time into putting together the kits. It just takes a lot of time setting everything up on the website, and then the sales just weren't there. And so, my idea, I just wanted to hold on to this so much, but I had to realize like this is just not it, right? And then also just looking at, like you said, like the bigger picture. And that was also then a conversation that I had with my partner. And I think having that conversation with someone actually helps, like talking through. Like for me, it was like there is this thing that says, like what is that? 70% of like startups or like newly found companies go bankrupt after like in the first 5 years or something,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Um, And then and so in my mind, I always had this thing of like, after 5 years, we need to be in this really stable position, which would have been in 2022. Now, in 2017, I was running three businesses. In 2018, I was running three businesses. In 2019, I gave birth to our baby. In 2020, I was working part time, and like being a mom of a newborn and working part time on your own business while shutting down two other businesses was a lot. In 2021, we saved our marriage. We continue to raise the child. I continue to work part time because the reality is, even with like, we are very privileged here in so I'm based in Berlin, Germany. We're very privileged in terms of the childcare situation here. Um, but even then, there is no way that you put in a 40-hour work week, at least not me, while caring for a child. And also, there is so much care work that gets added to a household after you add a child. Yeah, it's a lot. Um, yeah, that was like 2021 and 2022, and then 2023 was the day, like, was when I actually went back to working on the business full time, more or less full time. Um, so putting all of that into perspective, it kind of also reframed this thing of like, when was the actual starting point of the business? And the business that I run now, with especially with the yarns, that is so different than the business that I ran in 2017. So if you take like 2021 as the starting point, like September 2021, this is great. We're not even 3 years in. Perfect. Yeah.
Yes, I totally resonate with that because I have to do the same thing where it's like, all right, I started Snickerdoodle Knits in 2018, but 6 months in, I started to pivot towards knitting patterns. And then 2 months after that is when I actually started Pattern Design Circle. And so there's been, and plus in tandem in there, and there's a couple different community memberships that I've had, and there's been a lot of pivots, a lot of things that have happened in 5 years, and acknowledging what that actually does to the bigger picture, I think is super valuable.
Yeah. And I think there is no way that you cannot have these pivots almost, like,
Mhm.
because I don't believe in that you can start a business just with a piece of paper and a pen, and then that business that you put down with that pen and piece of paper is gonna be the business that you run in a year or in like 3 years or 5 years, right? Like now, um, I feel stability in terms of like the processes that we have, and like the foundation is there. How the actual business looks like, how the actual product, I should say, how the actual product looks like that we're selling, that is shifting. And one really lovely way to put this is something that I hear my husband. So my husband started his own company now, like a little over a year ago. Um, and he likes to explain it in a way that they are building the product, but then also one of their, like, the biggest product is the business. And I think this is such a great way of looking at it, because you can work towards stability. And I think you kind of like should work towards stability in the sense of the underlying business. Like, how does it fit within your life? How does it fit within your working style? What do you need from it? What do you want from it? How do the processes look like? All of these things. But then how that translates into what you're selling and what you are actually selling, that's a totally different story, right? Um, and so that is also something where I'm like, okay, because I think sometimes we hear the word pivot and then it kind of makes us feel bad. It's a little like, oh, I've done so many things. Yes, you have done so many things and you have learned so much. And all of this you take with you going forward.
Yes, I love to talk about the idea that it's okay to change and like it's normal to just continue to evolve. And I always think of it more as like a path. Like there's like bent, like we're on the
Oh,
same
yeah.
journey, and it's just kind of like these pivots are actually just maybe a bend in the road or whatever. But to actually stay aligned and authentic and actually even relevant in the world, you do have to make pivots and changes and respond to things that happen and where your inspiration leads you and all of those things that are super important as a business owner.
Totally. Totally. I think one of the ways that we're seeing this in the world right now, or in the past, I would say in the past year in a really big way, that might illustrate how this looks like in a small way, in a smaller business, is the effect of ChatGPT and AI. If you are looking at tech companies, very generalized, this has completely changed the way that they work, the way VCs put money into them, which, like all of it, all of it. And now you can sit there and be like, no, I don't want this change, and this is bad, and I'm going to resist this. But you can't ignore it. Like, the change is there, and it is an external change, and it is maybe not something that you would have wanted. Like me and the kids. I'm like, but why won't you buy the kids? And people are like, well, we don't want them. And I can be there and just, go on and on and on and just, put the money into the kids and put the time into the kids. Or I can be like, all right, I am obviously very attached to them. I need to find a way to let this go and move forward. And over time, like letting go of things and moving forward has become a lot easier, I find. And so that is, I completely agree with you. This like pivoting or changing, no matter whether that's motivated by like an external market change, like AI coming into play, or like an internal thing, like your inspiration, like we are running businesses because we love what we do. If we cannot follow where, our heart tells us to go, like what's the point? Really? One of the things that, I'm looking at like a parcel that has arrived just like a couple hours ago that's like sitting over there, which is going to be a new addition to the shop because I fell head over heels in love with spinning at the end of last year. And I'm just like, my gut tells me we are going to add spinning fiber, beautiful spinning fiber to the shop. I'm like, do I know if anyone is going to buy this? Nope. But like, this is something that just feels very right to me. And I think that is also something that can inform a lot of those pivots and changes. And in this very rational, very like in this patriarchy that we're living in, the intuition is discounted a lot, I find. But I think as business owners, this is actually something that can inform those changes that we feel like we're making. Now you can, and I think you should just like make sure there are sound changes as well, right? Like, so I haven't gone off and like bought spinning fiber like worth several thousands of euros, right? But like small bits and pieces there, kind of making sure something that I learned from last year, right? You're actually going to buy something that people will want to buy. But intuition is worth a lot, I think.
And even just follow, yes, 100% to that. But also, the way that following our passion and our inspiration changes our mindset, it makes it a lot of times easier to market and to talk about.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we're so excited about it. Not every time, does it translate to sales, but a lot of times when we're super excited and passionate about something, other people are also really excited and passionate about it and share it with their friends and all of the things. And so while it's not 100% true that the money follows the passion, there is some element of not only loving what you're doing more, but attracting more of the right people when you're actually
Yeah.
doing something that lights you up.
Yeah. Completely agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we hop back on the story timeline?
Yes. Yes. Let's do that. Sorry for
No,
just like
I'm the
completely.
one that side railed it. I'm always the one that side rails things. So, yeah. So where we were in the story, because
Yeah.
it's to January, I think, of this year.
Yeah. So we're in January. I just got the 9,000 euro printer invoice, looking at my bank account, our business bank account, being like, all right, I can't pay myself. Sort of then going back into the data and seeing, we haven't fallen back to here. We are here in a similar, but not the same situation, which then allowed me to shift into troubleshooting mode. Right. And there, I was, I was really, I was really proud of myself because I could see the growth of like me handling the situation versus the, do you have that in English? Headless chicken running around like
Yes,
a
yes.
year and a half ago, right? Where I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I have no idea what to do. I was still like, this time it was a lot more, I am a bad business owner, consciously shifting out of that mindset, talking very consciously, recognizing this is something that I am telling myself. How can I get myself out of that mindset? Talking to friends who are like, no, you are not. We know this. You do know this. This is why. And then being able to look at the situation, being like, all right, what do I need to fix this? And my first thing was, if I need to put money into the business, I can. I was in a privileged situation to have savings, or like I have savings that I could have put into the business to generate, like to just put a cash injection. I think is the right term, probably, right? Put a cash injection in, and then talking with my accountant about the different ways of doing that, and then realizing, all right, I will be able to save this business no matter whether I come up with great ideas or not. I will be able to at least, get us to a point where I can see, does this actually work, right? And that was such a huge relief. So I would say, like, if you are in a similar situation, ask yourself, what is the first thing that you need? Like, I needed to know that no matter what, I could save and solve this problem with the cash injection that I was fortunate enough to have. And that was like very concrete. I just looked at, all of the invoices that would be coming in over the next 3 months, and, all of the projected revenue through subscription renewals, all of this. And I was like, how much money do I actually need? It wasn't nearly as much as I had initially thought, which was also really good. So data really helps. And it gave me some much needed headspace for then being more creative, because that's the other thing with money problems. Like, I don't know, I can't be the only one. If I am thinking about money, my creativity just goes out the window. Like, I'm not able to think about anything else, but oh my God, we do not have the money.
Mm-hmm.
We don't. What? Like just classic flight or fight mode activated, cannot think about anything else. And by putting some numbers behind it and coming up with a backup plan, I was able to get myself out of that fight or flight mode. And then I yeah, as I said, I went into creative troubleshooting mode. I was like, all right, it feels very bad, but I think I just need to tell people that this is what's happening, and also tell people that I feel very bad about this because I have just asked for everyone's help. And by everyone, I mean our customers' help a year and a half ago. And, I am ashamed. Like, I don't want to be in this situation. I feel so much shame around this. But it was the right thing to do. And that's always been the case with being vulnerable. I think I went on Instagram, maybe even on our YouTube channel, but I think mostly on Instagram. And then I wrote a newsletter just sharing the situation. And I don't actually think that initially there was any call to action to it. Like, I think maybe I said something like, oh, that's not true. I think in my email, in my newsletter, I said, like, here are some ways that you can help. You can place an order. You can become a member of the collective. You can share about us on Instagram, just showing people a few different ways of supporting us. And they did. Like we had a lot, like not a lot, but we had quite a few people join the collective. I also ran a sale in January. So, I was like, all right, here are some of the things that I can do to generate more revenue. People were sharing about us. And some customers had like really brilliant ideas. One of our customers sent me an Instagram message and was like, I would really love to support you. I want this specific colorway of this specific yarn, but you do not have it in stock. Is there any way that I can pre-order this? And within 30 minutes, I had found, so we run on Shopify. I had found a Shopify app, a free app that would allow me to put pre-orders for certain colorways up on the website. So I did that because I thought it was brilliant. And like people really responded to that. And I felt it was a really nice combination of sort of giving people something that they wanted. So like products that they would really like to have, and also contributing to, our cash inflow.
And it also helps you with even knowing how much to order. Like
oh, totally,
you know what people are
totally
wanting, and it helps with order numbers too.
Yeah. It's really great. And then I also was like, and I felt a lot of shame around this, which I'm kind of like chuckling a little bit about in hindsight, because it wouldn't have been necessary at all. I was like, okay, I am just going to call our printer and ask if there are payment plan options available, because until now I had just always paid the entire invoice in full. And it's even sort of in Germany, we pay VAT to other businesses within Germany. And then because we do quarterly tax returns, it takes until April until I get that money back. And that was like a good €1,500, for example, right? Like, so, yeah. So I called them, and I have like the nicest sales manager there ever. And she picks up the phone, and I'm like, I am really embarrassed to ask this, but are there any, payment plan options available? And she just goes like, sure, we do this all the time. I could, for example, offer you 3 monthly payments, like from now through April. And I'm like, I couldn't talk. I was like, what? Yeah, I'm tearing up just like now thinking about this, because that was my reaction in that moment. I was like, I do not like calling people. That's just like a personal thing. And then having to make that call, and in my head I was going through all of the worst case scenarios. She was like, no, and like, you're such a small customer anyways, and like, what, and she was so nice about it. And she was like, yeah, sure, like, I'm just going to let our accounting department know that you're going to be paying in 3 installments, and that's done. And I was like, what? Yeah. And then I ran the numbers again, and I was like, we don't need the cash injection. With this, we do not need the cash injection, because I can tide us over by paying this invoice in 3 installments. We have subscription renewals coming in March. Like, I can do this. If I don't like the term hustle, but if I hustle, if I am smart about actually giving people things that they can buy from us, right, then we can make the revenue targets, and we can actually do this. We've hit January's and February's and March revenue target every single month. And I am just so like, we're not in the situation where we were in July last year, where I was like, we have a comfortable buffer in the bank account, and that's where I want us to get back to. But we are in a situation where I don't think we're going to go bankrupt anytime soon. And also, what's more important, we are in a situation where I feel like I have just grown through this process so much, again, as a business owner, that I can look at certain parts of the business that I was very much attached to, like the magazine, and look at them and be like, I realized that, a huge portion of the problem is that we are just subsidizing. That's a very specific thing, but we are subsidizing the magazine. We were subsidizing the magazine with the yarn sales, and we just cannot do that. Like, that just doesn't work. So either I find ways to make the magazine, I don't need it to make money. I need it to be a black zero. I need it to not lose money. because we can live off of the yarn sales. That's fine. But I can't put more money into the magazine. So, I also did things like reached out to more potential advertisers and did like a cold outreach campaign to stockists, all of the things to kind of make more money within that specific area. So that, yeah, but I kind of also like having gone through this again now, like knowing like, um, if I have this feeling again in my gut that I had towards sort of September, October last year, where I was like, you're turning a blind eye towards something, then I know to actually listen to that. And as much as I would love for things to then be different, like maybe it's going to be the magazine, maybe it's going to be something else entirely, like the kids were last year. I know that I actually can trust my intuition as a business owner. I might not want to hear what she has to say. Yeah. But I also know that I need to listen. So.
Yes, yes. And I feel like there's been a lot of beauty that has come out of the experience, specifically in how the community responded, because
Mm-hmm.
uh, I know we had talked not long after you kind of had put the post out and the newsletter out, and then there were so many people that shared it to like their stories and just like check out making stories and all these really kind words that came
Yeah.
in, and like you said, the pre-order recommendation. There's so many things that also were really beautiful, I think, from the community support side.
Oh, absolutely. Like that. I remember this. I think I put the stories up on a Friday or so. It was kind of like before the weekend. And I was not in that like really big, deep hole anymore, but not out of it, not by far. And over the weekend, so many kind messages came in over Instagram. So many people saying like, look, like we love what you're doing and we see you and we want you to continue doing your work. Um, and that just completely changed the entire thing. Like it just lifted me up so much. And I don't think that I could have done like any of the other things that I did then, like all of the creative brainstorming, all of the pushing through, because it was, I mean, like my schedule is really full anyways, because I like it that way. But like and then there was all of this work on top of the things that I had planned anyways. And so it was just like after this, the next, I would say 4 to 5 weeks were just a lot in terms of workload and like, like emotionally going through all of this. And the community response was what carried me through it. And I think it was, um, I think it was even stronger because words are great and I needed them. But I just felt so seen because so many people actually placed orders. And I think that is something that a lot of us struggle with, but we're not maybe talking a lot about it because it also kind of feels a little bit icky, right? This thing of like, this is great if you like my stuff, but I actually need you to buy my stuff if you can, right? That's always the caveat, right? But like,
Yes.
it's great if you tell me that you like the magazine or that you want us to stick around or, like for a designer, it's great if you say you love that new sweater pattern and I would very much like you to buy it.
Yes, it was just within, it would have been, I think it would have been after you shared your stuff. I can't remember who it was, but somebody had posted and was like, um, I don't know. It was like they were thinking of discontinuing, or I don't remember exactly the scenario, but basically then they ended up posting something else that was a response that was like, all right, I love that you guys love that I'm here and everything, but all the responses of you can't leave, you can't stop, like you have to keep going. Like when you're not actually supporting financially, then I can't keep going. Like
Yeah,
appreciate the work,
very true.
but it doesn't actually help solve the problem at all. And that doesn't mean everybody, like everybody's in their own unique situation, but I think we do see that a lot where it's like, all right, there's a lot of nice, kind words, but
Yeah.
there's this financial side of business too.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. And it is like, I think to us as like business owners, I mean, I run a small business, right? I have what I call a delightfully tiny team of like 3 part-time people plus me. Um, it's um, it means so much if you purchase something from a small business. Like it just makes a huge difference. Like if you're buying a €5 pattern or a €30 magazine or like a yarn order for €150, right? Like this means so much more than if you go to like Amazon, and I order from Amazon, right? Like no shame there, but like it's a different thing. You are supporting, like it just means, I think I want to make this comparison. It means so much more to me than to Jeff Bezos, right? Like it just does. And to my paycheck.
Yeah.
Um so um so yeah, that, but it was like the community response was really wonderful.
Yeah, I think it also is similar to what we talk about in business as far as, all right, a like only takes so much effort. Joining your email list takes a little bit more effort. Actually making the sale or, buying something
Mm,
takes the most effort. And so while yes, the words are nice and encouraging and lovely to hear, it does take more effort and more resources to like a customer is giving more of themselves
yeah.
when they do make a purchase.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that is something that like I am so thankful for every single customer. Like, I mean, without them, we wouldn't exist, right? Like they're the most important, like after me, because right. But like we talked about this, but like without them, we wouldn't exist.
Mhm.
Yeah. And like honestly, maybe even before me, because without them, we definitely wouldn't exist and I would be doing something else. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's
So
your
there's that.
favorite takeaway or lesson that you feel like you've taken from this experience?
Don't give up. That's probably the same takeaway as last time. But really, like, don't give up. There is, even though you might feel shame, right? There's no shame in being in this situation once or twice or maybe 3 times. We probably will be having this conversation, maybe in like not 1.5 years, but like, can we make it 2 years or so? Like, I don't know, like, um, and I think also it's kind of a little bit like, um, put your oxygen mask on first thing that they say on airplanes, right? Like similar to how I looked at what do I need to get out of fight or flight, which for me was looking at the data, finding that backup plan of the cash injection. If you are in a situation where you're like, okay, what is happening, right? How and you feel yourself kind of closing up and you're not able to actually problem solve, right? Ask yourself, what do I need to then be able to problem solve? Because I think part of the problem solving is then also this being vulnerable and talking to people and asking for things. Asking for things is hard, can feel very hard, I feel. Um and then yeah, like be vulnerable. That's the, the I get it. I get not everyone wants to be a brand. Not everyone wants to put everything out there of themselves, right? Like even I have certain boundaries, right? Like there are things of my life that do not make it into making stories, that do not make it onto social media. And the threshold of that is different for every single business owner, but you don't have to go all out with your vulnerability, right? Like you can choose a level that feels comfortable to you. Um, but give your audience, give your customers the chance to support you, because that's the other side of the coin. If they don't know how bad it is, then they also don't know to support. Like that
Mhm.
was one of the main takeaways that I took from not us, but from Pop Home closing down last year, which was one of the things that really, really shocked me. Like one of the business closures that just, I mean, obviously as a publisher, right? What does that mean? Like our knitting magazine's dead, but also as a business owner, right? Of like, if you I don't know the situation at all, right? Um, just that if you give people the chance to help, they actually can help. They might choose not to, but you give them the chance. And if you don't ever share anything about your struggles, then they just don't. Then they just assume. And I do this all the time. I look at, like businesses where I'm just like, all right, you got this. This is great, right? And then like, oh, oh, you know what I mean?
Yes, yes. Something that I really love about what happened in your situation was, there was all of the shame and guilt around it, and it could have felt maybe even more shameful after you put it out. Like if you hadn't gotten responses, or like worst case scenario that might have been going on in your head was that you'll just feel even more shame and guilt. But when
Mm,
you were vulnerable and willing to share that thing, that I feel like the response was just kind of like the remedy to that, where it was like a huge amount of validation, not only in words, but in
yeah.
finances of, no, you really are an amazing human being doing beautiful
Mm,
work that
mhm.
people really value. When we don't put ourselves out there to receive that, you're
Yeah.
not going to get it.
Oh, ooh, that's so true. That's very true.
Yes. So do you have any thoughts for if there's somebody listening who maybe is really struggling with finances right now, whatever the specific situation is,
Mhm.
or words of encouragement or tips? I guess you already said, look at what you actually need for yourself to get
Yeah.
light. Do you have another one?
Um, I would say look at the numbers. And I know that this is scary, and I know that there are a lot of folks, especially in our industry, who are maybe coming at it from the more creative side of things, and like numbers don't feel comfortable to them, or numbers, like numbers are hard. And I get it. One of the reasons why I was in the situation, Jenny, was because I, despite actually looking at the numbers, didn't want to listen to the numbers last year. The thing is, numbers don't lie. Yeah. And we are lying to ourselves a lot, I think. Um, that sounded really harsh, and I'm really sorry about that.
But it also
It's,
feels like a mic drop. Like I think it's a very real reality of being a business
yeah,
owner is I think it's easy to be on one of two extremes where you're just like so in the creative mode and excited and inspired and everything's rainbows and sunshine, and then when like you do take a peek at maybe things looking bleak, then it's like, oh, this is just horrible and despair and like, but to actually maybe be more balanced and pay attention to those numbers and
yeah,
still remain optimistic and all of the things, but yeah.
yeah. The I think the numbers, and why I like them so much, is because I mean, they don't lie, and then also they tell you a lot, like when you listen to them, right? And they might tell you really hard things that you don't want to hear. I think that's mainly what I mean with we lie a lot to ourselves, because
Yes, yes.
that we are looking, like I did with the kids, right? Like we are looking at the data, and then we're like, all right, but next time will be different. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I would say like look at the numbers, and no matter like there you this will look different for everyone, right? Like you might do what I did, which is like looking at, okay, how much do I actually need to be making to um pay whatever I need to contribute to the household or pay my bills, which I think this is something that everyone should actually be doing. Yeah. Like know that number. You might not be making it, but just know that number. Um, and then I think you will be surprised by how maybe that is not that far away from what you're making. And that's also something that I would invite you to kind of then shift, because the like this is maybe a little bit hard. No, maybe it's not. I'm going to try and make an example with a product based business, right? Like, um, try to think about the difference between what you are making right now and what you want to be making to say pay yourself in terms of how many more orders do you need? How many more skeins of yarn do you need to sell? How many more patterns do you need to sell? How many more coaching clients, for example, do you need to get, right? Because I find that shifting away from the actual dollar or euro number to how many more things do I need to sell, or how many more services do I need to sell, really shifts the focus. Kind of takes away a little bit of the, maybe not pressure, but like, then you're actually not looking at the numbers, right? You're looking at the thing that fuels your creativity. And then also it kind of just expands a little bit into what are some other ways that you could make up that money, right? Like for me, it was then realizing, okay, like I could run a campaign to advertisers, yeah, and like just close a bit of that gap through getting more ad revenue in. For someone else, it might be starting a Patreon or starting like a monthly fiber club or something, right? Like just other things.
Yeah, I think money is made up. So trying to wrap our head around money can be really difficult, where when you start thinking about in terms of number of sales, whatever the thing is you're selling, it makes it easier to actually grasp how much is this? What are we actually talking about instead of just this number that is money.
Yeah, totally. And then the other tip that I have, more like maybe going forward, especially if you don't have a good overview of your numbers, I think that is one of the most important things that you can do as a business owner, is like knowing how your sales are and knowing how much you want to be making this month and knowing how far away from that you are. And there are a million different ways of doing that. Like how I do this is I still do our sort of like pre-accounting. Every Friday I pay our bills. I look at the bank account. I sort of, I do all of the bookings in our accounting software, right? Like I have a spreadsheet where I then put in how much money we have made to that day in the month. And then it all goes out to our accountant for the whole formal accounting stuff. But that way, every Friday, I can look at the numbers and know how we're doing. I did that last year. I didn't learn anything from it then, but like, like I think like this is just also a really nice way of becoming more comfortable with the numbers. If you're spending more time with them, you might actually learn to like them.
Yeah, and I think it becomes more incentivized, at least my own experience. More often I look at the numbers, the more I want to make those numbers be what I want them to be. And then when they are, what I want them to be, it's really exciting and motivating. And you just want to keep doing the same thing. Like I think there's a lot to be said around just even mindset around
that. Totally. 100%.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, for sharing vulnerably with your community and now with us, for being willing to talk about numbers. While we were talking, I was thinking this is really beautiful because a lot of times when we hear conversations around money being difficult in business and, business closures and all this stuff, it can be really disheartening. And, but I love that here, like, I feel like you shared a lot of like, all right, let's problem solve through it. Let's like, here's some solutions. Like there are answers to this. It's not just this really dark, bleak picture.
Absolutely. And I mean, that is a skill set that you have as a business owner, no matter whether you're a pattern designer, a yarn dyer, whatever your business is, you're problem solving the entire day, no matter whether that is the colorway isn't turning out or the grading isn't really working. You know how to do this, and you take this and apply it to a really hard situation.
Yes. Okay. So I was going to wrap it up, but
sorry.
Nicole Walters is a business mentor that I really enjoy, and she says we are born problem solvers. We are all problem solvers. Like you already know how to problem solve. As a baby, when you need something, you know to cry and you will get what you need. And, as you grow older, there are all sorts of things that you learn to problem solve to do the things that you need and want to do. And so we know how to problem solve. Problem solving, I think a lot of people, that feels intimidating. Like, I'm not good at it.
Mm.
But I love the mindset shift that she had of like, you've been problem solving your whole life. You're actually really, really good at it. Just apply it here.
Oh, totally. And I mean, like when I say problem solving, this is very, very low key for me. Like I identify the problem that I want to solve. That sounds very, very like, blah, yeah. But like, really, like in that specific case, the problem was we needed to make money, and how to solve it was coming up with creative ways of making money. And then I just sat down with a pen and a piece of paper, and I made a list of all of the ideas, like just very classic brainstorming of how we could actually be making money. And then I went through it, right? Like, you know how to do this. My 5-year-old, almost 5-year-old, knows how to do this. The other day I was on the sofa with a really bad migraine, and like David had to go to a meeting, and Oren was there and was like, hey, can I watch a video? And I'm like, sweetie, I can't look at the screen right now. I just can't. And he's like, it's fine, mama. You can just put the video on for me, and then you go down into the bedroom and lie down. And I'm like, yes, that sounds like a really good solution. Like my brain in that moment wasn't able to come up with that very, very like reasonable, very useful solution. This was 4.5.
Yes.
We're born to do this.
Yes, I love that. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.